So I had said earlier when we were not sure if Mark was going to be here that there would be a sense of chaos in the service. And now's the time for chaos because I realize I'm not happy with the sermon I wrote. And so I'm going to kind of go off script. And the reason for it is I realize I have an issue with the candle of peace. Hope, definitely. Love, joy, yeah. But peace, not that I have anything against peace. Peace is a wonderful concept. Peace is one of those things that we strive for, that we want to have in our life when everything is going the way it's supposed to go, when everything, I like my voice is smooth. Could you pass? Thank you, Pam. When everything is going smooth, you're avoiding the camera, aren't you? But the problem is that if what we are striving for is peace, we often then try to make things fit the way that we think they're supposed to fit. That in order that there is no conflict, we try to impose a certain order, and we do it with the idea that peace is what we are striving for, and so it's okay if there has to be some confining, some restricting, some sense of authority over it. And again, not that I have issues with peace or with authority, it's just that sometimes we use peace as an excuse to close down some people, to shut some doors, to force people to be a certain way. Pax Romana, is a term given to a 200-year period where during the Roman Empire, during the reign starting with Augustus, for about 200 years there was peace in all the area that the Romans controlled. And people could walk on the roads, merchants could move freely, and people say it's great that we had those 200 years of peace. The problem is those 200 years of peace came at the cost of the lives of millions. Where basically the Roman Empire said, if you don't agree with me, we will either kill you or sell you into slavery. And so using that sense of we want to bring about peace, they enslaved, in the end, millions of people to be able to have their order and their structure imposed upon everyone else. And for some people, they say, yes, this is great. The Romans brought about peace. But they ignore the cost that it came at, the lives it came at, the freedom that it came at. Because with that kind of peace, there comes restriction, there becomes confinement, there comes loss. So, whereas I believe peace is important, and I think the idea of having peace is a wonderful idea, peace should not be the goal. Peace instead is the outcome when we live a rightful life. And that's really in the passage in Isaiah, in the passage in Romans, that's what they are saying. They're saying it's peace is what we get when we live the way that we're supposed to. When we live a righteous life. And that is hard. Because to live a righteous life means that we have to be willing to sacrifice. To live a righteous life means I don't live just in a way that is good for me. I live in a way that is good for everyone. And I do it not because I might benefit from it, but because it is the right thing to do. That I use that as my marker, that even though it will cause pain and turmoil for myself at certain times, I live the way that I believe that I should live because it is the right way to live. I told Tony I was going to use him as an example twice today because after this, I'll still probably use you as an example. I just won't get to see your face turn red. But one of the things when I first came into the minimum prison, I heard it from staff, I heard it from inmates, I heard it all the time, that Tony was never getting out. That because of the deportation order, because of his crime, because all these things, I heard it, and I heard it from a lot of people, from a lot of staff and a lot of inmates. Yeah, well, Tony's never getting out. And it bothered me because I'd always say, well, you don't know, who knows what the future will hold, that there is always hope. But if this is what I was told and I struggled, I cannot imagine what it must have been like for Tony to always have that sense that he was never going to get out. And for a lot of people in the prison system, when you are told that you will never get out, that what you do in the end will never get you that parole, there are other people like that, and the way that they then live their lives are, if I'm going to be here, I might as well take as much advantage of this as I can, and they live in a life that, well, it is, even if they would get parole, they would not get parole because of the charges and so forth that they line up. But Tony, even without that sense of maybe being able to get out, always lived right. Not because it was trying to get him parole, not because it would get him out. Tony tried to live right. He did the right things. And again, I can't tell you how many of the inmates on Thursday when he went up for his parole hearing would come up to me and say, I really hope Tony's going to get it. Because Tony is a nice guy. And he's not a nice guy because he gets anything for it. In fact, he's a nice guy, and I still make fun of him. But he's a nice guy because that was the right thing to do. And he lived a life that was right, even when he was not promised any of the rewards or any of the benefits that he should get because of it. For us to have peace means that we have to live the right life, regardless of what may or may not come of it. We hope for peace, but sometimes living the right life leads to pain and anguish because sometimes doing the right thing is not the easy thing. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking the hard path of having to give up certain things. The goal is for us to live a righteous life. But to live a righteous life means that we have to be attentive to the needs and the concerns of the people around us. That your needs are as important as my needs. And to live that kind of life means also then that we have to start to look at people in a different way and not to judge them. And that is hard because we have this ingrained desire to be able to say to people, this is how you should be. And it's the approach that we've taken to peace. This is how you have to live so that we can have peace. This is what you need to do so we can get along. This is how I expect you to be so I can like you. As opposed to seeing a person and saying, you are my brother or my sister in Christ. And you may do things that annoy me, but I love you, and our relationship is not based on the sense of whether you annoy me or not. Our relationship is based on the fact that we are siblings in the family of God. Because if we were able to not be siblings with people that annoyed us, a lot of families would be a lot smaller than they are today. But because of that sense of family, because of that sense of being able to put things aside, it means we have to see people for who they are and not try to always change or make them be different. The passage in Isaiah where it says the cow lies down with the bear and the lion lies down with the ox. These are examples that, you can have a bear lying down with a cow nowadays, but chances are it's because the bear is eating the cow. The bear has forced its will upon the cow, and the cow has no choice but to comply. Or you have all these animals living together side by side peacefully in a zoo, where they are separated with bars and cages. And in this way, we impose a sense of peace and order on them. But what Isaiah is talking about is something completely different. It means the cow and the bear have found a sense of peace where they both benefit from it. The lion and the ox, it only works when both are wanting this sense of peace and desire. So what do you do when one person wants it and the other person doesn't? You live the best as you are able. You live as you can, even when there is all sorts of costs to it, because regardless of what the other person chooses, we know what we are called to choose. My children and Pam were having a discussion yesterday about how, trying to change society for the better, a lot of those people often get bulldozed over, and we don't hear perspective from their side. And I just made the smart aleck comment that, well, that's why we have the Martyrs' Mirror. That's the book that's written for all the people who started the Mennonite faith, who were killed for their faith. And they were people of peace, who believed in peace and pacifism, but their lives did not bear that fruit, because even though they lived that, the other people would not accept it, and so they were put to death for it. And yet what they did was they lived the right way, even if the world did not accept them for it. When we want to live a life of peace, it means that we have to actually seek the well-being of every single person. Shalom. Shalom is a word that gets translated from the Hebrew all the time to peace. But shalom means a lot more than just there's no disturbance or everything is calm. Shalom means well-being. My well-being, but I can't have well-being. I can't have shalom if Murray doesn't have shalom. If Murray is out of order, then I can't say, I'm completely at peace, because my brother isn't. So I have to have, for shalom to work, I have to help in whichever way I can, or at least to bear witness and to walk along Murray when he is struggling as well, as with everyone else. Being a people of peace does not mean that we get to live without strife. It means that we are called to walk and with each other through the hard times, doing and striving for what is right. Peace comes when we do not do what is best for us, ourselves, but when we do the best for everyone. And in that means we have to have the mental ability, the capability, the empathy to see other people and value them where they are at. When I grew up in a small town, and everyone there was expected to be the same way. That's how you got along. You grew up in a small town, and everyone had to play hockey. We all had to listen to the same music. If you listened to different kind of music in my school, you were an outsider. If you wanted to fit in, you did what everyone else did. So you played hockey, you listened to AC/DC, you did all of these things. I still listen to some AC/DC, although, as I said, on all their songs are kind of the same. But the occasional one when it comes up on the radio. But and especially my family, have taught me how important it is to just accept people where they're at, what they listen to, what they watch, who they are, to see the beauty in each person and then strive to live right by them, as opposed to saying, no, this is who you have to be. John the Baptist. John the Baptist is one of those guys who probably irritated a lot of people. And who can blame? He was wearing clothes made out of camel hair. And he had this kind of attitude about him. And he was straightforward. He was abrupt with people. But he was calling people to repentance. And when he saw the Pharisees and the Sadducees come towards him, these were the people who used their faith, their self-righteousness, their power and their position to condemn, to judge others, to try to force other people to live a certain way. And so what does John the Baptist say when he sees these Sadducees and these Pharisees coming? He says, "You brood of vipers." Like, who warned you to come from flee from the coming wrath? Like, you know what's coming, and now you're running here when you've lived all this kind of life, and you can see him, the kind of like, just, and I always like that line, "You brood of vipers," because it means I get to say it from the pulpit. You brood of vipers. But what he doesn't say is get lost. What he doesn't say is turn around and leave. I can do nothing for you. These people have irritated him to no end. They have used their power, their position, their self-righteousness, we're better than everyone, and has made things worse in their trying to say this is what you have to do to follow God, and they've contorted it. And yet when they come to John the Baptist, and he's mad at them, as we are free, as we should be mad, but he does not turn them away. Instead, he says, live lives that bear fruit for repentance. I will baptize you and live in a way that does that honor. As opposed to, I will have nothing to do with you. I grew up in that small town. I got chaos. I had the one story and I jumped to the other. That small town where everyone had to live the same, I didn't like it. I did not enjoy it. And when I went to university, I found a group of people who were so different. We had one guy who was a raging capitalist. We had an entrepreneur. We had an engineer. We had a guy who was all about sports. We had one guy who was an avid communist who has since become a major business person. And then we had one guy who was very sarcastic. I won't tell you where I fall in that. But we got all these different people together. And suddenly I realized that I didn't have to pick my friends on being like me. In fact, the greatest friends I had were people who were different than me. And the value that I got from listening to the capitalists and the communists argue, and like I said, in the end, the communist, he called his car the Manifesto, and now he owns like 3 businesses and does quite well. But all of these things, we didn't judge people on their politics, on the sports, on their intellect. We were friends. And I am sad to see when we do not see that in the world today. When we don't see people who are different than us and just say, well, that's my friend. I don't agree with everything that they do, but they're my friend. And I can listen to them and they can listen to me. That's the kind of peace we're going for. Not the peace where everyone has to line up and do what they're told. The peace where we see the value in all the people around us. I said I was going to pick on Tony twice. But that whole idea of being able to see what's good for other people, even at the cost. There is an incredible joy today for the congregation. And I know that, Tony only gets to come once a month, but he has become a part of us very much. And his baptism is still one of those very profound moments for my service in the church. And so, Tony is a dear friend. I say this. And so I am incredibly happy for him. But there is a part of me that's sad. Because after this, we're kicking Tony out and he can't come back. He's gone from this country and he's not allowed to return. And so if Tony hadn't got parole, I would still be able to keep my friend close and be able to mock and ridicule him on a regular basis. But would I change that at all for Tony's well-being? For enough, not even maybe. But that's how we to live this life, we have to wish for the best for others, even at times when it might be, this isn't what I want. It is what I want, but there is, trust me, I want you gone. Stop drinking my coffee. But it's being able to see what's best for everyone. And that is hard. Because we get caught up in our own ideas, we get caught up in our own lanes, and we forget to see the value of somebody else who's completely different than us. And to see that as much as we often think we have something to teach them and something that they can learn from us, it's also the same the other way around. During Advent, I tell a continuing story for all 4 Sundays, and some of you were not here last Sunday, and as I said, I did not post my sermon. I will, I just haven't gotten around to it. But last week, the beginning part of my Advent story was the town of False Hope. And it's a little town, it's an oasis, if you will, in the middle of the desert. The next closest town is about 100 miles, 160 kilometers, because my son will get mad if I use miles, away. And so it's in this little community, and it's called False Hope because people have always come there believing something big is going to happen. There was a gold rush that started it, and then the gold ran out faster than any other gold rush. And the town went from, 100 to 10,000 back to around 2,000. And ever since then, there have always been rumors that have attracted people. They were going to build a railroad through it. There was rich minerals. They were going to stock that little oasis lake with exotic fish. Hollywood superstar was going to come and make it a huge... There have always been these ideas that something is just around the corner to make it a great and amazing town. It just never happens. And so it was originally called Hope, but then it changed its name to False Hope. And yesterday's or last week's story was when there was a young couple that came in and they said, this is a beautiful community. Like, why are you concerned with something that you're waiting for when you don't realize what you already have? Everyone gets along here. There is a sense of no judgment, and people can be their weird, exotic self, like Malcolm, who has his imaginary friend John, and walks around, and they give John a vote because John has just always been a part of their community because Malcolm has. And Samantha, who's the retired cop from Chicago, who walks the streets at 3 a.m. because she can. And so there you have all of these weird people who have come forward. And Jenny, who is the mayor, because they realized their last mayor died 3 years ago and they never held an election, she becomes mayor and she reminds them that this is something valuable. And just as everyone kind of starts to realize, yeah, this is great, a tech billionaire has offered to buy that community after doing some tests and will give everyone 3 times the cost of their property if they move so that he can own this land. And so that's where we left it last week. Suddenly now you have people who are conflicted. There are people who want to stay in the community, who love this, who this has always been their home. But there's other people who are like, we're so isolated, they say. It's forever to get anywhere. And now we get a chance to get enough money that we can actually move somewhere else. Why wouldn't we want to move? And so when the offer is made to buy the property, right away there starts to be a debate because 75% of the town has to sell for them to be able to do the deal. And so they start trying to convince each other. And at first it starts off with, well, it'll be really great to move out to a city where, we can get fast food. And the other person says, oh, I hate fast food. And then the next person oh, it'll be so good to be closer to hospitals. And the other place says, yeah, because we'll need them, because we'll be so strong. And so they start to argue. And soon the arguments become more and more intense. And people start putting homemade signs on their yard. Heck no, we won't go. And pack up the wagons, it's time to move on. And they start going back and forth. And soon this community that was so peaceful, that always got along, suddenly now there's all sorts of strife and anger as they each want their thing to happen. And they strive to be able to convince each other, not necessarily by reason or by listening, but by speaking louder. Because isn't that how you convince someone else? If you have a point, you say yours louder than the other person, and then they're bound to agree with you, right? And so people start to shout and to yell. They go to the local corner store or the local store and they see that someone else is in there. They go, I'm not going in there. And so you have one people that are like, we have to leave, and other people, we have to stay. And then you have this group in the middle that are going to go with whoever's talking to them. We need to leave. Yeah, we need to leave, sure. And the next person, we should stay. Yeah, we should stay. And they feel torn apart because they love their neighbors, but they don't know which way to go. And everything started to break down. People started to not only just disagree, but started to get mad. And suddenly all the things that they disagreed with about in the past now become major issues as opposed to just being the quirks of the other person. And even Malcolm and his imaginary friend John, in front of their house, there were two signs because Malcolm and John weren't agreeing. And John was make-believe, but he would not agree with Malcolm. And so they had two different signs in their front yard, and this was kept going on and on. The longest running book study club in the town was a book study that always picked the most depressing novels, and that the group would then read it and have to come up with something positive to say about it. And this group had been meeting for 35 years with different members coming and going. They called it the most depressing book club in the world. And it was fun because they'd read these really Wuthering Heights, and then they'd have to say what was really good and positive about it. And it was this ongoing thing, and people, but they could no longer meet. And one of the members said, "Isn't it terrible that we read all these sad books, but the saddest thing that we could not overcome was our disagreement with one another?" And so for the first time in 35 years, they did not meet. And everyone was going to Jenny. She was the new mayor, and everyone was coming to her saying, "You got to tell people that we need to move. You got to tell people that we have to stay. You saw the value in us. You have to remind them of that." And Jenny, she'd only lived there for like 2 years, a year and a half. She didn't know what to do. And as the people became more and more angry, and the signs became meaner and meaner, and suddenly the community just would not talk, she did what the only thing she could do. She held the town barbecue, because that's the one thing that everyone came to. Only unlike last time when she did it when she became mayor and everyone gathered together, this time there were two distinct camps, that we have to leave and that we have to stay. And there was a group in the middle who really were non-committal, so they just kind of wandered around and never actually sat down anywhere. And when Jenny had everyone in front of her, she said, "What I'm going to ask us to do," she said, "is not to say what we believe others should do. I just want you to come up to the mic," she says, "and everyone will get a chance, and simply say what you're feeling, what you are feeling." And everyone's like, "Oh, that's not going to work." And everyone's kind of sitting, in the whole room is quiet, or the whole barbecue area is quiet. And suddenly someone gets up, and it's Bobby, the guy who steals stuff all the time. And whenever something's missing, they go to Bobby's house and he gives it back to them, usually cleaned and fixed up. And Bobby comes and he says, "I cannot imagine any place that would accept me the way you all have. I take things. I don't take them because I want them. I see something and I have this desire to take it, and then I feel guilty and I fix it up, and I'm so relieved when you come and pick it up. I don't think I could live anywhere else." And he sat down. And then old Ben came up. Ben came and he said, "You don't know this because I haven't told you, but I have cancer, and I need chemo treatment. And the closest hospital is a 2-hour drive. And Emma, my wife, I don't think she can keep doing that back and forth twice a week. And so we thought maybe if we get to relocate closer to the hospital, maybe then we'll be okay. But that's why I want to leave." And then Samantha, who walks the streets, came, and she said how she was able to walk and feel a sense of peace for the first time in her life. Growing up in Chicago, she never did. And then somebody else went up and said, "I've always wanted to study, but I don't have the resource. I don't have the financial resources to go somewhere and study. Now I'd be able to go and I'd be able to learn about ancient Mesopotamia." And so they all came up, each person, some why they wanted to stay, some why they wanted to go. And Malcolm even came up, and they had never actually heard from John. Always just see Malcolm talking to John, and they would wave to Malcolm, they'd wave to John, and Malcolm would wave back. But for the first time, Malcolm comes to the mic and he says, "I want to leave because I want to see more of the world." He says, but John wants to stay. And it's the first time he spoke on behalf of John. He says, "Because you all know and care for him." And it went back and forth, back and forth. And by the end, everyone was crying because they were touched that people made themselves so vulnerable, but they also realized that they could not make everything work. That there were going to be people who had this strong agreement that they had to leave, and for good reasons, like Ben going to the hospital, and also then like Bobby who would not be able to live any, and so they felt tormented. But every single person came to the mic. And when they sat down, and the last person sat down, there wasn't a dry eye around. And for the first time since the announcement had been made about selling, there was a sense of peace. And Jenny, she looked from the front, and she could see that the people who had been in two separate camps were now all sitting mingled together. They still disagreed. They still didn't know what they were going to do. But they had heard each person, and each person felt cared for. Until one of the young guys ran to the mic and yelled, he goes, "I have the answer!" So that's next week. I came up with the story, and then I realized sometimes when your brain kind of clicks why I came up with that story. When I was in the Ottawa Mennonite Church as the youth and young adult minister in the early 90s, there was disagreement in the church, and it became heated. And it was back and forth, back and forth. People had very strong opinions. I believe it was about music, because music has torn more congregations apart than anything else. But everyone was had very strong opinions on it. And so one of the members of the congregation called a meeting and did exactly that. I realized as I was telling the story, that's where that came from, deep down there somewhere. But everyone went to the mic and just shared their thoughts and their feelings. And when it came time to me to share, me being who I am, like Jimmy, I was bawling. I was so overwhelmed that everyone had made themselves vulnerable. And after that, it was never an issue again. We kind of did a mixture of the music and stuff, but no one ever got upset anymore. The first step to having a sense of peace is to listen to the people around you. It is to pay attention to them and to hear and see them. You don't have to agree with them. In fact, we don't all need to step in the same line. That would be a sad world. But we all need to be listened to. We all need to be respected. We all need to be cared for. Peace will come, but it comes when we live a righteous life. And a righteous life is a life where we care for what is not only right for us, but right for everyone else.